Hi, I'm David Flowers. I'm so excited for the opportunity to make this video for you and share with you some very important things I've learned in my 25 years working with couples. I want to start by familiarizing you with my background and experience, so hopefully I can seem at least a little bit more like a person to you and less like a talking head. As I said, my name is Dave. I was born in Flint, Michigan, and have lived in and mostly around the Flint area all my life. I met the girl who became my wife when we were in elementary school, fifth grade. We were married in 1988 at the age of 19. We have three brilliant and beautiful adult daughters, a 6-year-old granddaughter, and a 2-year-old grandson. I have taught for Spring Arbor University for 26 years, the last almost 20 of those years exclusively in the MA in Counseling program. I served 1 year in 2020 and 21 as the interim clinical director of that program. Spent about 7 years supervising students through practicum and internship, and about that same amount of time doing post-grad group supervision as well. So about halfway through graduate school, I took what was supposed to be a 2-month interim job as the student ministries pastor at a local church and ended up staying in the ministry for 22 years, including founding and leading a church for 14 of them. The whole time I was in the ministry, I moonlighted working with couples and families in the community and some individuals here and there. I got certified as a prepare and rich facilitator, completed workshops in EFT and imago therapy, and did tons and tons of premarital counseling for couples in the community, which would then usually lead directly into officiating. I have no idea how many hundreds of weddings. And years later, when some of those couples were struggling, I would often end up seeing them again. In 2016, I retired from the ministry and started a full-time counseling practice and knew I wanted to become as good as possible at working with couples. At this point, I'm working through Gottman Level 3 training. When I complete that, I'm looking forward to spending a few years training more deeply in EFT, trauma, and substance abuse counseling to enhance my couples work. So that's basically my deal. I still teach for SAU, but I'm focusing mostly on my private practice. And now I only do post-grad supervision for people who are fairly confident they want to specialize in couples work. As I said, I'm excited I was asked by Mahaka to share with you today, and I thank them for extending the invitation to me. It means a lot. And I put a little time into thinking about what I wanted to share with you here. I was originally thinking of working through something from the Gottmans, but then I thought, every couples counselor listening to that presentation is going to end up bored because they'll probably already be so familiar with it. So I started thinking about my own experience. Was there anything I have learned purely through experience that I could share with you about working with couples? Something you're not going to find, an approach or a system of some kind. And it turns out there is. So maybe the first thing I can teach you today, before we really dig into the material, is that as you do your daily work, you are accumulating wisdom and experience and insights of your own that you didn't learn from a book or a supervisor or a class. And not only is there great value in that wisdom, but I think it's one of your greatest contributions as a therapist ultimately. I want to say, especially if you're a newer therapist, day after day, you're growing in this wisdom. And as you grow in wisdom, you grow in authority. Because although the Gottmans or Bessel van der Kolk or Carl Rogers or Sue Johnson or Francine Shapiro or whoever may be the source of a lot of knowledge for you, your authority will ultimately proceed more from your wisdom. Right? From those unique insights you accumulate through your own experience, applying all these different things you have learned. I think most seasoned therapists would affirm this. So I just wanted to reinforce that. But what's my nugget of wisdom? That is, what do I have to talk to you about that I didn't learn from a guru or a class or a seminar? Well, let's get into that. So I noticed when I first started working with couples, I was consistently baffled by something that would happen again and again. One couple after another would come in and kind of sit down on the couch, and I'd say, "How can I help you?" And one partner would say, "David, our marriage is falling apart. I don't even know if counseling can help, or maybe whether it's even too late. Things are so bad. We can't communicate. We can't work through the smallest of issues without fighting. Everything turns into a gripe session where we both end up hurt, angry, frustrated, or all the above. And I just can't take it anymore. So I'd turn to the other partner and I'd say, what's your take on this? And they'd respond with something like this. You know, Dave, I think we have a great marriage. I'm super happy. And as far as I'm concerned, the only reason I'm even here is because of how unhappy my partner is. I mean, I don't really think we have any major issues. And I would go, what? Are you two even living in the same universe, much less in the same house? I mean, how could two people in an intimate relationship experience that relationship so differently? And by the way, to what extent can we even say the relationship between partners living this far from each other perceptually can even be one of intimacy or connection? I mean, doesn't that tell you something right there? I mean, this was and is a fairly common experience, and it baffled me. And frankly, it scared me for years because you don't want to be in a position where one of the first things you find out about a couple is super confusing, something you can't begin to get your head around. Especially when you're newer to doing couples therapy and not very confident. Let's face it, I mean, that's where we're all starting out. But when you know what I'm about to teach you right now, it won't scare you anymore. You know, it'll actually help you understand them and their relationship better. And it took me a long time to figure out what was happening in these situations, but I did. And that's what I want to share with you today. So this gigantic disconnection that you see pretty regularly happens because partners are oriented very differently around two things. First is their way of thinking about what a good relationship is and how to know it's going well. And the other is different ways of feeling connected within the relationship. So before I go into that, I want to be clear on something. I'm going to be using a heterosexual relationship model here, but this will apply to most couples, whether gay or straight. Although this problem certainly doesn't appear in every single relationship that you'll see, it occurs in a lot of them. And I would suggest most of them on some level because these differences are mostly just about individual wiring. So to the extent that opposites attract, and that's a pretty large extent in my experience, one partner in a relationship, whether gay or straight, will often think differently about what a good relationship is. And one partner will often feel connection differently than the other. So once I've pointed out these dimensions clearly to you and what's going on there, you should be able to use this with the majority of couples you're working with. And I say this, by the way, as someone in a heterosexual relationship to whom these generalizations I'm going to be making do not apply, right? We're in that smaller group of couples where these patterns are there, but they're reversed, right? I'm the therapist. I tend to be the more talky one, right? The important thing for you as a therapist is to know the pattern itself is pretty common, and then to be able to listen well enough to see how that pattern might be showing up in the couple that is right in front of you, okay? So let's start with different ways of thinking about what a good relationship is and what that feels like. So men tend to evaluate the quality of their intimate relationship by whether there's conflict going on at that moment. If you go up to a typical man and you ask whether things are going okay in his intimate relationship, he'll take a moment. He'll kind of scan in his mind over the past 3 or 4 days. And he'll go, have we had a big fight lately? If we did, is she over it yet? I mean, did she smile when she got up this morning? Did she seem okay? If there seems to be a relative absence of ongoing conflict, or if there has been recent conflict, but she seemed to be, over it this morning, he'll probably answer, I think the relationship's, going pretty well, right? So that's a man. Basically, men say, if there's an absence of conflict, we're probably doing okay, right? So for women typically are kind of coming from a place, if we're connecting emotionally, we're doing okay. Women tend to evaluate the quality of their intimate relationships not by whether there's an absence of conflict, but by whether there's a sense of immediate and ongoing emotional connection. Okay, you go up to that man's wife that, we were talking about the man a moment ago. Go up to his wife or his partner and you ask that same question. How are things going in your intimate relationship. And just like him, she'll do, kind of a mental scan, but she won't be typically looking for conflict. Instead, she'll be searching for the presence of emotional connection. She'll think, have we talked recently? When he hurt my feelings and I told him the other day, did he take it seriously or did he get defensive? Do I feel like he has my back when I need to depend on him for emotional support? If the answer to several of those questions is no, she'll say, things really are not very good. Whether there has been recent conflict or not, she's looking for emotional connection. And if she does feel generally connected to, then the fact that there may be a conflict going on now isn't going to usually keep her from feeling like things are going okay. Many years ago, a man from the church I was working at walked into my office crying, telling me his wife had just left him. Right? He'd come home the previous day and all of her stuff was gone and he was devastated. So knowing them both, I asked for permission to contact her and see if she'd be willing to share her perspective, and he granted it. So I called and she graciously spoke with me about what she was feeling about the relationship and why she had decided to leave. And I'll summarize her position with this sentence. Dave, I told him over and over for 20 years that I wasn't happy in the relationship and that something was wrong. And she granted me permission to share this with him. And when I told him this, he said, well, that's true. We did argue a lot. She did tell me she was unhappy a lot. I told her I was unhappy a lot. We both had things that bothered us in the relationship, only it never occurred to me ever to leave her. Furthermore, although she told me regularly that she was unhappy, that was always when we were fighting. We still had a lot of beautiful times together. We went on vacations, we did cookouts with friends, we had sex regularly that I think we both thought was pretty good. We planned parties and celebrated our kids' birthdays together. I thought we had a good marriage despite its flaws. And folks, this is the problem. See, he's looking for absence of conflict. She's looking for presence of emotional connection. If he's happy when there's an absence of conflict, and in nearly every relationship there are moments where active conflict is not happening, well, then he likely thinks things are pretty good. I've actually heard men say, what do you mean you're unhappy? Just this morning you smiled at me and kissed me before I left for work. How can you be unhappy? Just yesterday we had a great time at our son's baseball game. And she will frequently look at him and say, I've told you so many times I'm not happy. So often that I feel distant from you. I've told you so often that we aren't really part of each other's lives. But I'm trying to make the best of it. I'm not going to walk around being mean and nasty to you 24/7 just so that you don't start thinking everything's okay, right? Just to show you how unhappy I am. So that's the first disconnection, right? He's looking for absence of conflict. She's looking for presence of emotional connection. So let's talk about the second kind of problem or disconnect. When you think about this conflict, the first issue I talked about, you think, oh, absence of conflict versus presence of connection. Oh, so the partners aren't connected, so we could just help them connect and take care of the problem. But it's not so easy, because this second issue I want to talk to you about is different ways of feeling connected to each other. That's a big problem, because men frequently feel connected to their partners through companionship, which is just being together, being around each other. While for women, it's usually conversations about feelings and emotional realities. So the first thing I want to make clear here, and I say this as a male relationship therapist in a field dominated by females, which, ladies, is fine, right? Not a problem. But if you're going to be successful in working with relationships, you have to be able to understand and validate this difference. We have to get rid of this idea that there's a hierarchy, that companionship, that doing things together is fine, but conversation is the brass ring, that's what's actually substantive, that it's somehow deeper or more meaningful. If you're listening to me right now and you're in a relationship and you're female, there's a good chance conversation may well be the more meaningful of the two from your perspective. But I really believe one of the reasons men often resist and have bad experiences in couples counseling is because many counselors, both male and female, by the way, don't understand this. After all, we're therapists. We're comfortable talking about feelings, and we believe that level of sharing is the deepest and most meaningful. And it's probably often fair to say it is the deepest. But that doesn't automatically make it the most meaningful because what's meaningful to whom is subjectively determined. The fact that conversation may feel the most meaningful to one partner doesn't invalidate how meaningful acts of companionship may be to the other. And so we tell women their feelings of needing conversation, needing to have feelings validated, needing to talk about feelings and emotional experience. We tell them all that is valid. And of course, all that is valid. Do we tell men their need for companionship is valid? That we understand how deeply meaningful it is to him that she's with him at events, restaurants, snowmobiling, ball games, just simply doing the things they used to love to do together. As therapists, I think we all speak a common language when it comes to feelings, about how to express, how to listen to, how to empathize with and validate feelings. But I want to flesh out companionship for you a bit more. First of all, please understand I'm not suggesting this is some kind of binary thing, right? I'm not saying women don't have companionship needs and men don't have conversation needs. You know things are never that simple in our work. If you've done this for any amount of time, you know that. But a person can identify what they most need by asking this question. Which one of these two needs, even if I have it met for me constantly, will still somehow feel insufficient unless the other need is met also? And most women will say, I enjoy companionship, living together, sharing a bed together, raising the kids, going to their games, doing fun things together. But if I can't feel heard and understood when I'm talking to my partner, all that other stuff cannot fill that hole. Most men will say, I enjoy talking to my partner, but it's just the living of our lives moment to moment together that makes me feel connected to her. No amount of conversation fills that for me if I don't get her presence and attention. So let's talk about an anecdote that'll kind of help explain this a little bit. A man approaches his wife for the first time in years to ask her to go fishing with him. They used to fish together a lot when they were dating, but since the kids have come along, they really don't anymore. And she doesn't want to. She knows she's going to feel guilty leaving the kids with her mom. But they've both been trying harder to prioritize each other, and she knows they need the time away. So they get the kids to mom's house. And the next morning, they're up by 3, 4 a.m. to drive north to where he likes to fish. And they have this fantastic drive, talking and laughing and kind of reconnecting. And they get to that fishing spot. It's this dazzlingly beautiful place. They get the equipment out of the car. They pick the spot they'll be fishing from. And they cast their lines. And about 5 minutes later, she tries to carry on the conversation they were having on the drive up. And he says, "Shh, you'll spook the fish." So she's quiet for 15 minutes or so. Then she tries again to start the conversation, more quietly this time. But he replies curtly, "You used to fish with me all the time. You know the rules. No talking when we're fishing." So she remains silent for the next 5 hours. And finally they grab their gear and load up and head home. And he's as happy as he's been in years. His emotional bucket is overflowing. I mean, he just got to spend hours and hours doing what he loves the most, next to the girl he loves the most. And he can't remember last time he felt this in love with her. But he notices she's sitting very quietly next to him. And he asks if she's okay a few times. And she says she's fine, but eventually says, pretty angrily, I set aside my day to take this trip with you, and now I just regret it. Because we sat there shoulder to shoulder for more than 5 hours, and we hardly talked at all. All these issues we've had in our relationship that we haven't talked about. All of that time together. And you wouldn't engage me in any meaningful conversation. You never want to talk about anything. I will never do this with you again. And he is heartbroken. He had a wonderful time with her on that trip. On the trip up, even, he had loved being with her and sitting shoulder to shoulder in the car with her and talking with her and then sitting next to her as they fished together in that beautiful place. And he had so looked forward to enjoying her company on the way back. He was even thinking maybe they'd try to talk through some of the tough stuff now that they'd had all this amazing fun together and he was feeling so connected to her. I mean, he was nervous about it, but he did know they needed to try. But she's furious with him, feeling taken advantage of, feeling deprived of the conversation she had looked forward to while they were fishing about the difficult things in their relationship that she knows they need to talk about. And she wants that, and she needs that. And that conversation is necessary, isn't it? Of course. So this isn't about whose needs are most important, right? This is about acknowledging both are important because his needs are real to him and hers are real to her. So partners really need to understand how they're wired often so differently when it comes to this. They need to be able to understand and bless each other's basic way of being. And when I say bless, I just mean say that it's okay. He doesn't talk to her anymore like he did when they were dating, and he can't stop doing that. She doesn't understand how deeply he needs her to engage and be at his side when he's doing things and how much that means to him. She can't minimize that or ignore how important that is. They need to bless each other by understanding the way each other is wired and saying, it's okay, I can hear you and I can meet that for you. When I'm discussing this with couples, I explain that a lot of man's needs for companionship are met just in the daily living of life together. You know, he wakes up and goes to bed next to her every day. He raises the kids with her. He goes places with her, eats dinner with her. They take care of their home together. And this explains a lot about why men are often completely gobsmacked when they find out how unhappy she is. Because so many of their companionship needs are met just in the daily living of life together. His lack of dissatisfaction in the relationship is often evidence that most of his needs are being met. But the conversation piece requires something extra. And if that's what she needs, she's not going to be content just with chats about the kids and home management and plans and other obligations of life. She wants and she needs to go deeper. And that's another video entirely, so I won't belabor it. But I've noticed that for men who are companionship oriented, therapy sessions and other deep conversations about feelings can actually be quite taxing mentally and emotionally. I mean, it's an effort he needs to make, to be sure, but it can be very intense for him. They need to be able to hear each other. So that's it, folks. This is an explanation for how one partner can think the relationship is falling apart. That partner is looking for presence of emotional contact through conversation about feelings and is often not getting those things. And the other can think it's going fine, often because they're looking for a basic absence of conflict and just living life together, much of which is happening by default, even in conflicted relationships. So let's wrap this up. Summary. We've talked today about how differently partners in an intimate relationship often think about that relationship and how it comes from two big differences in wiring. He's looking for absence of what? Conflict, while she's looking for presence of connection. Now, he often connects through companionship, while she often connects through conversations about feelings and emotional realities. So when you understand this, it carries a lot of implications for treatment and ways you can help partners better understand themselves and each other. Both Gottman and EFT have tools that can help couples explore these differences and connect more authentically with each other. But that's also another video, because the point of this one was just to help you understand what's actually going on when partners seem to have completely different feelings about what's going on in the relationship. So I hope this has been helpful for you. You can find a brief blog post on this topic on my website at davidflowerstherapy.com/separate-worlds. davidflowerstherapy.com/separate-worlds. If you'd like to get a hold of me for any reason, you can reach me at dave@davidflowerstherapy.com. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I've so much enjoyed this today.